Okay, so in this episode of Mathmeatics, we're going to talk about solving solving quadratics by taking their square roots. And these are quadratics. We can solve quadratics by their square roots when they're in the form of ax squared plus c is equal to 0. And note that the b in this case is equal to 0, so there's no bx term. If you remember, normal standard form is in the form of ax squared plus bx plus c, and that's equal to 0 or y. Okay, we have a function, all right? Now, just to remind you, well, what is a square root? Because when we're talking about square roots, we're looking at perfect squares. And when we're looking at perfect squares, we're looking at the terms of if I take 1 and I square it, that's equal to 1. If I take 2 and I square it, that's equal to 4. And 3 and I square that, that's equal to 9. 4 squared is equal to 16. So 1, 4, 9, 16, those are perfect squares, and so on, and we continue. Again, you want to memorize 1 through 12. The perfect squares, so 12 squared would be 144. You want to memorize those perfect squares, okay? Now, when you're taking the square root of a number, so let's say I take the square root of, let's say 25. When I take the square root of 25, that's going to give me 5. Okay, now remind you, whenever I take the square root of a number, it's actually, we're taking the plus and the minus of that value. So this would actually be plus or minus 5. So there's a reason for that, and the reason I talk about this. Let's say we have our first example. First of all, when we have a quadratic that's in the form of ax squared plus c, so let's say if I have a quadratic, an example, first example, I'm going to write example. And let's say it's in the form of x squared minus 49, and that's equal to 0. Okay, well, first thing I want to do, step 1, is I want to isolate it, all right? I want to isolate the x. All right, well, when I know in order to isolate the x, I'm going to add 49 to both sides. So then that's going to give me x squared is equal to 49. Now, there's also a little additional thing here. That 49, you want that to be positive 49. If it's negative, you can't, there's no solution to that. And I'll talk about a problem like that in just a second. So in order to cancel out and isolate x, I'm going to take the square root of both sides. Okay, when I take the square root of that x squared, that's a perfect square. X squared is a perfect square. So the radical and one of those x's is going to cancel out, and you're just left with x. The 49 is equal to 7 times 7, so the square root of 49 is going to give you 7. But be very careful here, because when I'm talking about taking the square root of a quadratic that's plus or minus 7, you must include both solutions. So you can write it this way, or you can say x is equal to minus 7, positive 7, because you have two potential values. The reason that being, let me talk about graphing it real quick, or let me put it on my little handy dandy calculator. If I go to my calculator, I always have trouble finding this one specific calculator. There it is. Okay. So we have, I'm going to go to y equals, and I'm going to put in y. Now remember, we know, okay, so this is going to get, let me graph it first. So we have x squared, and it's going to be minus 49. Okay, so that's our graph, because that's y is equal to x squared minus 49. And I'm going to graph this. So graph. All right, so if you notice, all right, this has a vertex at 0, 49. And then my x values are here at negative 7 and here at 7. So those are the two. You have a positive and a negative. So this is not where we just have a vertex at one point and that point is duplicated. You have two actual intersections on this line. All right, so hopefully that helps explain how that visually, why you have a plus and a minus. All right, now let's look at a problem where we don't have a solution. And talk about why we don't have a solution. So if I give you a quadratic equation, and on your notes, this is question number 3. All right, so this is x squared plus 25, and let's say that's equal to 0. All right, now I'm going to subtract 25 from both sides. So x squared is equal to negative 25. Well, when I take the square root of both sides, that's going to give me x is equal to plus or minus the square root of, let's just say, negative 25. We can't have, in the real number system, we can't have a negative number in our radicand. We can't have a negative number underneath the radical. So when your value, when you move that over and your value, your radicand, if your radicand would be a negative number, then your x values, you have an empty solution. You have no solution. Now, let's look at this graphically. What this means is that graphically, that means that this is not going to cross the x-axis. If we look, so if I talk about this and I say y is equal to, or x is equal to squared, x squared plus 25, okay, that's what it was, and then I'm going to graph it. As you can see, we do not cross the x-axis, so that's why there's no solution to this quadratic equation in the real number system, because our quadratic equation won't cross it. All right, hopefully that helps you on answering these questions when solving quadratics by square roots. If you have any questions, I'm going to probably do a couple more problems in the next video.